October 11, 1942. And Lieutenant Commander William Cole, 32 years old, from Boston, Massachusetts, gunnery officer aboard heavy cruiser USS San Francisco, positioned off Savo Island preparing for night engagement against Japanese naval forces approaching Guadalcanal, studied radar scope displaying new SG surface search radar that Navy Bureau of Ordnance had installed 3 weeks earlier over objections from ship's captain, who argued that radar equipment was unreliable distraction that would interfere with traditional visual lookout procedures and fire control methods that U.S. Navy had employed successfully for decades. Admiral Richmond Turner, commanding amphibious forces at Guadalcanal, had briefed that Japanese Tokyo Express reinforcement runs were delivering troops and supplies to Japanese garrison nightly using fast destroyer squadrons that exploited superior Japanese night fighting capabilities. And intelligence estimated that tonight's Japanese force numbered approximately 6 cruisers and 8 destroyers under Rear Admiral Aratamo Goto, significantly outnumbering American squadron of 4 cruisers and 5 destroyers commanded by Rear Admiral Norman Scott, who'd publicly stated that his forces would employ traditional visual spotting and searchlight illumination tactics that had been standard U.S. Navy doctrine since World War I, despite staff officers' suggestions that new radar equipment might provide targeting advantage in darkness. Cole, who'd received 2 weeks radar training at Pearl Harbor before San Francisco departed for Guadalcanal, believed that radar could detect Japanese ships at ranges exceeding 10,000 yards before visual lookouts could identify targets in darkness, giving American forces critical minutes to achieve firing solutions and commence engagement before Japanese ships closed to torpedo range, where their superior Type 93 long-lance torpedoes would devastate American formation, and he'd convinced his Division Officer Lieutenant James Thompson to authorize connecting radar display directly to main battery fire control system, bypassing standard procedure requiring visual confirmation before engaging targets, and this unauthorized modification violated Navy doctrine and risked court-martial if radar targeting proved inaccurate, producing friendly fire incidents. But Cole, who'd studied action reports from previous Guadalcanal naval battles where Japanese night fighting superiority had sunk 4 American cruisers and 7 destroyers, believed that continuing traditional tactics against enemy who demonstrated consistent night combat advantage would produce continued American defeats. The strategic context that made naval commanders question whether standard procedures were adequate centered on campaign's precarious situation. Marines holding Guadalcanal's Henderson Field airstrip numbered approximately 19,000 troops facing Japanese garrison of approximately 20,000 who were receiving nightly reinforcements through Tokyo Express runs that American naval forces had consistently failed to intercept effectively, and if Japanese succeeded in building garrison to 30,000 or more, they could overwhelm Marine defensive perimeter, threatening to recapture Henderson Field, which provided only Allied airbase within fighter range of Japanese bases at Rabaul, making Guadalcanal strategically critical for controlling South Pacific sea lanes. What happened over next 4 months during 7 major night naval engagements off Guadalcanal would validate Cole's conviction that radar-directed fire control provided decisive advantage over visual methods in night combat. Though initial resistance from senior officers who distrusted new technology nearly prevented radar's employment, and subsequent equipment failures and operator errors almost caused procedure to be abandoned before its effectiveness could be demonstrated. But persistence by Cole and other radar advocates eventually produced tactical doctrine that U.S. Navy would adopt as standard practice for remainder of Pacific War, and that would revolutionize naval warfare by making darkness no longer advantage for side with superior night vision training, but rather advantage for side with superior electronics and fire control integration. According to USS San Francisco deck logs and Bureau of Ships installation records, Cole obtained radar equipment through standard Navy procurement after SG surface search radar became available September 1942. But authorization to integrate radar directly with fire control system came through informal arrangement that circumvented official doctrine, San Francisco's Captain Daniel Callahan, who would later command Naval Task Force at Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, had initially opposed radar installation, arguing during August 1942 staff meeting that crew needed to focus on perfecting visual spotting and gunnery fundamentals rather than learning and proven electronic equipment that he believed would malfunction during combat when most needed, and Callahan stated specifically that radar might provide useful navigation information, but should not be trusted for fire control because radar contacts couldn't distinguish between friendly and enemy ships, creating unacceptable friendly fire risk. Navy Bureau of Ordnance had issued Technical Bulletin July 1942, describing SG radar's capabilities, including maximum detection range of approximately 15,000 yards for cruiser-sized targets and accuracy of approximately 100 yards in range and 2 degrees in bearing. But bulletin included disclaimer that radar should supplement rather than replace visual observation because equipment reliability remained unproven under combat conditions and because radar operators required extensive training to interpret scope displays correctly, avoiding false contacts from rain squalls, landmasses, or equipment malfunctions that could produce targeting errors. Previous American failures with numbers at Guadalcanal naval battles provided stark evidence that traditional tactics weren't working against Japanese night fighting capabilities. Battle of Savo Island August 9 had cost 4 Allied cruisers sunk and 1 cruiser heavily damaged within 30-minute engagement, where Japanese force achieved complete surprise because American lookouts failed to detect approaching Japanese ships until they illuminated American vessels with searchlights and opened fire at point-blank range, and Battle of Cape Esperance August 24 had seen Japanese submarines sink carrier USS Wasp and damage battleship USS North Carolina, demonstrating that American naval forces operating near Guadalcanal faced continuous threat from Japanese forces that consistently achieved tactical surprise through superior night operations. Enemy advantage that American naval intelligence had identified was Japanese Navy's systematic night combat training and superior optical equipment. Japanese lookouts trained extensively in night vision techniques, including dark adaptation procedures and using specialized binoculars optimized for low-light conditions. Japanese fire control doctrine emphasized rapid engagement at close range using searchlight illumination to blind American gunners, while Japanese crews fired on visually acquired targets, and most critically, Japanese destroyers and cruisers carried Type 93 long lance torpedoes with range exceeding 20,000 yards, double American torpedo range, and warhead size of approximately 1,100 pounds compared to American torpedoes 600 pounds, making single Japanese torpedo hit potentially fatal to cruiser-sized vessel. Technical challenge of employing radar for fire control included multiple factors that skeptical officers cited as reasons why radar shouldn't direct gunfire. SG radar displayed range and bearing to targets, but didn't provide elevation information necessary for calculating firing solutions against ships beyond visual range. Radar couldn't identify target types, meaning operators might designate friendly ships as enemy targets, producing catastrophic friendly fire incidents, and radar reliability in tropical maritime environment remained unproven, with concerns that humidity, vibration from gunfire, and electrical interference from ship systems might cause equipment failures during critical combat moments. Specific training deficiencies that Cole identified during September 1942. Familiarization period included that radar operators received minimal instruction in interpreting scope displays under combat conditions where multiple contacts, weather returns, and landmasses created complex pictures requiring skilled interpretation to distinguish actual ship contacts from false returns. That fire control personnel had no procedures for integrating radar data with mechanical fire control computers that calculated gun elevation and bearing based on target range and motion, and that communication protocols between radar operators and gun directors didn't exist, requiring Cole to develop informal procedures through trial exercises. Cole's background as electrical engineering graduate from MIT class of 1932 gave him technical foundation that most naval officers lacked. He understood radio wave propagation principles, allowing him to predict radar performance under various atmospheric conditions, recognized that radar's electronic nature made it immune to visual deception tactics that Japanese employed using searchlights and flares, and grasped that integrating radar with fire control computers could automate targeting process, reducing time from target detection to guns firing from typical 3 to 5 minutes using visual methods to potentially under 1 minute using radar direction, and this technical comprehension convinced him that radar represented fundamental tactical advantage rather than mere supplementary tool that senior officers perceived. According to U.S. Navy intelligence assessments compiled from captured Japanese documents and radio intercepts, enemy tactical advantage centered on Imperial Japanese Navy's doctrine emphasizing night surface combat as counter to American daylight air superiority. Japanese naval training allocated approximately 40% of operational exercises to night combat compared to American Navy's approximately 10%. Japanese ships were equipped with superior optical equipment including specialized night binoculars with larger objective lenses providing better light gathering than American equivalents, and Japanese tactics emphasized aggressive closing to torpedo range where long-lance torpedoes' superior performance would devastate American formations before American guns could engage effectively. American casualties suffered during previous Guadalcanal naval engagements validated warnings that Japanese night fighting superiority posed existential threat to campaign. Battle of Savo Island August 9 had cost approximately 1,000 American and Australian sailors killed when Japanese cruiser force sank 4 Allied cruisers, USS Quincy, USS Vincennes, USS Astoria, and HMAS Canberra, in approximately 30 minutes of combat where Japanese achieved complete surprise and American forces never effectively returned fire because lookouts detected Japanese ships only after searchlight illumination occurred at ranges under 5,000 yards, giving gun crews insufficient time to train guns on targets before Japanese torpedoes struck. And Battle of Eastern Solomons August 24 had cost carrier USS Enterprise heavily damaged, requiring 2 months repairs, demonstrating that even carriers with air cover remained vulnerable to Japanese naval forces operating at night or in bad weather. Why standard American tactics were failing centered on fundamental assumption that visual detection would provide adequate warning time for American ships to achieve firing solutions and commence engagement before Japanese forces closed to decisive range. But this assumption proved invalid against enemy who trained extensively in night operations and who possessed superior optical equipment, allowing Japanese lookouts to detect American ships before American lookouts detected Japanese vessels, creating consistent Japanese first strike advantage. Technical challenge that made Japanese night attacks so difficult to counter was combination of tactics and weapons. Japanese destroyers approached at high speed, typically 28 to 32 knots, making visual detection difficult because lookouts had minimal time between initial sighting and weapons range. Japanese employed searchlight illumination tactics where they'd illuminate American ships, blinding American lookouts while Japanese crews fired on clearly visible targets, and long lance torpedoes launched from ranges exceeding 10,000 yards arrived before American ships could maneuver defensively because torpedo running time from launch to impact was approximately 6 to 8 minutes, during which American ships traveling at cruising speed of 15 knots covered only approximately 3,000 yards, insufficient distance to clear torpedo spread patterns. Specific tactical problems that American commanders encountered included Japanese use of rain squalls and darkness to approach undetected until reaching optimal attack positions, Japanese coordination between multiple ships creating simultaneous attacks from multiple bearings preventing effective defensive maneuvers, and Japanese willingness to accept close-range combat where their superior night fighting training gave them decisive advantages that American technological superiority in radar and fire control couldn't exploit if engagement commenced at visual ranges. Japanese operational capability was enhanced by interior lines at Rabaul, allowing them to sortie naval forces on short notice for Tokyo Express runs that American intelligence detected only hours before arrival, leaving insufficient time for American naval forces to position advantageously. And Japanese used fast destroyer squadrons that could transit from Rabaul to Guadalcanal in approximately 10 hours, allowing them to deliver reinforcements or conduct bombardment missions, then withdraw before dawn when American air power from Henderson Field could engage them, creating tactical pattern where Japanese controlled seas at night while Americans controlled skies by day. But where naval control was more operationally significant because it allowed Japanese to sustain their garrison. American casualties from indirect effects of failed naval interdiction during August-October 1942 exceeded direct combat losses, demonstrating that Japanese Tokyo Express success had strategic implications. Marines on Guadalcanal received irregular resupply because Japanese naval dominance at night prevented American cargo ships from safely unloading at Guadalcanal, requiring supplies to be delivered by fast destroyer runs similar to Japanese methods, but with lower cargo capacity, and Marine rations were cut to 2 meals daily by October as supply situation deteriorated, while Japanese garrison received regular reinforcement and resupply, allowing them to maintain offensive operations that progressively weakened Marine defensive perimeter. Naval gunfire support limitations became critical factor when Japanese battleships conducted bombardment missions against Henderson Field. October 13 to 14, Japanese battleships Kongo and Haruna fired approximately 1,014-inch shells at Henderson Field, destroying approximately 40 aircraft and cratering runways, requiring 2 days repairs before flight operations could resume. And these bombardment missions demonstrated that American naval forces lacked capability to intercept or engage Japanese capital ships operating at night, leaving Henderson Field vulnerable to attacks that progressively degraded its operational capability, threatening to neutralize only American airbase in region. Statistical analysis of early Guadalcanal naval engagements showed that Japanese achieved first detection in approximately 80% of night encounters, giving them consistent initiative advantage. Japanese torpedo hit probability exceeded 20% compared to American torpedo hit probability below 5%, demonstrating superior weapon performance and crew training. And Japanese suffered lower casualties relative to damage inflicted, with loss ratio favoring Japan approximately 3-1 in tonnage sunk, all indicating that continuing traditional American tactics against enemy with demonstrated superiority in night combat would produce continued defeats that might cost America control of Guadalcanal and broader Solomon Islands campaign. According to USS San Francisco Action Report filed October 15, 1942, Cole's first successful radar-directed fire control occurred during Battle of Cape Esperance October 11 to 12, when his radar detected Japanese cruiser force at range of approximately 14,000 yards, roughly 7 nautical miles, while American lookouts hadn't yet visually identified any Japanese ships. And Cole immediately reported contact to bridge, recommending that main battery commence firing on radar-designated target despite standing orders requiring visual confirmation before engaging, because Admiral Scott feared friendly fire against American destroyers that were screening ahead of cruiser formation. Step-by-step procedure that Cole employed involved first identifying radar contact as probable enemy based on bearing indicating contact was approaching from direction of Japanese bases rather than direction of American destroyer screen, calculating approximate range rate by observing how quickly range decreased on successive radar sweeps, suggesting contact was closing at approximately 25 knots, consistent with Japanese cruiser speed, transmitting target coordinates to main battery plot, where fire control computers calculated gun elevation and bearing for 8-inch guns, and requesting permission from bridge to commence firing, though Admiral Scott initially denied permission, wanting visual confirmation. Technical process required approximately 3 minutes from initial radar detection to achieving firing solution, radar provided continuous range and bearing updates, allowing fire control computers to track target motion and predict future position, accounting for shell flight time of approximately 20 to 30 seconds. Cole's team calculated target course and speed by observing bearing drift and range change over multiple radar sweeps, creating motion solution that traditional visual spotting required several minutes to develop, and fire control computers automatically adjusted for ship's own motion, wind effects, and ballistic characteristics of 8-inch shells, producing firing solution that required only Admiral's authorization to commence engagement. First result demonstrated radar fire control's decisive advantage. At approximately 2,346 hours, Admiral Scott authorized searchlight illumination of radar-designated target. Searchlights revealed Japanese heavy cruiser Aoba at range of approximately 4,600 yards, already within San Francisco's gun solution, and San Francisco's 9 8-inch guns fired full broadside within 20 seconds of illumination, scoring multiple hits on Aoba's superstructure that killed Japanese Admiral Goto and disabled ship's fire control. And this rapid engagement sequence demonstrated that radar had allowed American ship to achieve complete firing solution before visual identification, giving American forces critical advantage of firing first with accurate aim rather than firing hastily after visual detection. Exact distances and timing that proved radar coordination's effectiveness included approximately 14,000 yards initial radar detection compared to approximately 4,600 yards when lookouts visually identified target after searchlight illumination, approximately 3 minutes from radar detection to firing solution compared to typical 5 to 8 minutes using visual methods, and approximately 20 seconds from illumination to guns firing, representing near instantaneous engagement that Japanese hadn't anticipated based on previous encounters where American ships required extended periods to acquire targets and commence firing. Enemy recognition that Americans were employing different fire control procedures came during battle when Japanese observed that American ships achieved firing solutions and commenced accurate fire with unusual rapidity. Japanese action reports captured later described confusion aboard Japanese ships when American gunfire began before Japanese lookouts had detected American vessels, suggesting Americans had achieved surprise despite Japanese approaching under cover of rain squall that should have concealed them from visual detection, and Japanese commanders initially attributed American success to exceptional luck or possibly to American lookouts having superior night vision equipment rather than recognizing that Americans were using radar for targeting, creating false understanding of American capabilities that would persist through several subsequent engagements. Battle outcome validated Cole's radar employment advocacy. American forces sank Japanese cruiser Furitaka and destroyer Fubuki while damaging cruisers Aoba and Kinagasa. American losses included destroyer USS Duncan, sunken cruiser USS Boise heavily damaged. But strategic result was that Japanese reinforcement convoy turned back without landing troops, representing first time American naval forces had successfully prevented Tokyo Express run. And this tactical victory demonstrated that American forces could achieve favorable outcomes in night combat when employing radar-directed fire control despite Japanese numerical and training advantages. Admiral Scott, who'd initially opposed radar employment, acknowledged in post-battle report that radar had provided critical advantage, allowing American ships to achieve firing solutions before visual detection. Though Scott attributed victory primarily to superior American gunnery and tactical positioning rather than to radar technology, reflecting institutional reluctance to credit electronic equipment over traditional naval skills. But Scott authorized continued radar integration with fire control systems, recognizing that results justified modified procedures even if he personally remained skeptical of complete reliance on electronics. Numbers from October 11 to 12 engagement showed measurable improvement in fire control effectiveness. San Francisco expended approximately 270 rounds of 8-inch ammunition, achieving approximately 22 confirmed hits, representing hit probability of approximately 8%, substantially better than peacetime gunnery exercise average of approximately 5%, while Japanese cruiser Aoba received approximately 40 hits from multiple American ships, demonstrating that radar-directed fire achieved accuracy comparable to or exceeding visual fire control, despite engaging at night under conditions that traditionally favored Japanese forces who dominated previous night encounters through superior visual capabilities. According to Japanese naval intelligence assessments compiled from post-war interrogations, Imperial Japanese Navy recognized that American forces had improved night combat capability by late October 1942, and issued tactical guidance recommending countermeasures, though Japanese analysts incorrectly attributed American improvement to better lookout training and enhanced optical equipment rather than to radar employment that Japanese intelligence hadn't detected. Japanese doctrine recommended approaching American forces from multiple bearings to complicate American fire control, requiring defenders to engage multiple threats simultaneously, using maximum speed during final approach to minimize time that American ships had for achieving firing solutions, and employing smokescreens and rapid course changes to confuse American gunners once combat commenced, and these countermeasures were designed to defeat visual fire control methods and proved partially effective against radar, though not for reasons Japanese planners understood. Specific countermeasures that Japanese forces implemented included aggressive zigzag patterns during approach, creating complex motion solutions that required extended tracking time before fire control computers could calculate reliable target course and speed, launching torpedoes at maximum range, 15 to 20,000 yards, earlier in engagement sequence to achieve torpedo hits before American ships could maneuver after detecting radar contacts, and concentrating searchlight illumination on specific American ships attempting to overwhelm their fire control through simultaneous engagements from multiple bearings, and these tactics achieved mixed success, with some creating difficulties for American radar operators while others proved ineffective because they were designed to counter visual detection rather than electronic detection. Near-death moment that demonstrated Japanese adapted tactics occurred November 12 to 13 during First Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, when Cole aboard USS San Francisco tracked multiple Japanese contacts approaching from different bearings. Radar displayed approximately 13 contacts, representing Japanese force of 2 battleships and 14 destroyers, vastly outnumbering American force of 5 cruisers and 8 destroyers, and as range closed below 10,000 yards, Japanese ships began zigzagging, creating confused radar picture where individual contacts became difficult to track and where determining which contacts represented greatest threat required rapid assessment that Cole's team struggled to perform quickly enough for effective fire control, and situation deteriorated when Japanese battleship High suddenly altered course directly toward San Francisco's formation at range of approximately 7,000 yards, forcing Cole to abandon systematic tracking of multiple contacts and focus on immediate threat. Factual circumstances illustrated challenge that multiple simultaneous threats created. San Francisco's radar could track approximately 20 contacts simultaneously, but fire control computers could engage only one target at a time, meaning Cole had to prioritize threats based on range, bearing, and assess danger level. And during chaotic night engagement with shells splashing around San Francisco from multiple Japanese ships and with friendly ships maneuvering to avoid collisions, priority assignment became nearly impossible, requiring Cole to make rapid decisions with incomplete information about which radar contacts deserved engagement priority, and several times Cole designated targets that proved to be friendly ships, forcing him to halt firing procedures before shells were launched. And these near-friendly fire incidents demonstrated that radar fire control without reliable IFF identification, friend or foe system, created unacceptable risk during complex multi-ship engagements. Cole's counter to Japanese counter-tactics involved multiple adaptations. First, his team developed rapid contact identification procedures using bearing and range rate to distinguish between ships approaching from Japanese-controlled directions likely representing enemies and contacts approaching from American-controlled directions likely representing friendlies, even though this heuristic wasn't foolproof. Second, he established priority targeting rules where largest radar returns representing battleship or cruiser-sized vessels received engagement priority over smaller destroyer contacts, and third, he began maintaining continuous tracking on all contacts even when fire control was engaging specific target, allowing rapid engagement shifting if primary target was destroyed or if higher priority threat emerged. Technical modifications to procedures included Cole requesting that bridge establish regular radio communication with screening destroyers to maintain awareness of friendly ship positions, allowing cross-reference with radar contacts to identify which returns were friendlies versus enemies, though this procedure depended on destroyers maintaining radio discipline and reporting positions accurately, which didn't always occur during combat chaos, and developing verbal shorthand with fire control. Crew or Cole could designate targets using clock position and approximate range, target bearing 030, range 8,000 yards, rather than precise coordinates, reducing communication time, allowing faster engagement decisions. Additional Japanese tactical adaptation included launching massive torpedo spreads at extended ranges. November 13, Japanese destroyers launched approximately 60 long lance torpedoes at American formation from ranges exceeding 12,000 yards, creating torpedo threat that couldn't be effectively countered because radar couldn't detect torpedo wakes and because torpedo spread pattern was so wide that maneuvering to avoid torpedoes from one bearing often drove ships into torpedoes approaching from different bearing, and this tactic produced several American ship losses, including destroyer USS Barton sunk by torpedo hit and cruiser USS Juno severely damaged by torpedo hit that broke ship's keel, forcing withdrawal from combat, and these losses demonstrated that Japanese maintained significant night combat capabilities despite American radar advantages. Combat engagement November 13 illustrated continued tactical evolution when San Francisco engaged Japanese battleship High at close range. Cole's radar tracked High approaching at range of approximately 8,500 yards and designated target for main battery. But before San Francisco completed firing solution, Japanese searchlights illuminated San Francisco from multiple bearings, blinding lookouts and forcing Cole to continue fire control using only radar returns. And San Francisco fired approximately 20 salvos, achieving multiple hits on High superstructure while simultaneously receiving hits from Japanese return fire that killed Admiral Callahan and most bridge crew, and Cole, who was in fire control station, survived, but lost communications with bridge, forcing him to continue directing fire independently using only radar information without receiving tactical orders from ship's command, creating situation where technology enabled continued combat effectiveness despite catastrophic command casualties. According to 3rd Fleet action reports covering period October-November 1942, radar-directed fire control procedures were progressively refined and expanded across engaged naval units as effectiveness became apparent. By mid-November, approximately 8 cruisers and 15 destroyers operating near Guadalcanal had integrated radar displays with fire control systems, following San Francisco's example. Average time from target detection to commencing fire decreased from typical 8 minutes using visual methods to approximately 2 minutes using radar direction, representing 75% reduction, and Japanese ships that previously approached undetected until visual range were being engaged at ranges exceeding 10,000 yards, forcing Japanese to maneuver defensively rather than maintaining attack courses. Multiple engagements demonstrated cumulative effectiveness as techniques spread. November 14 to 15, Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal saw USS Washington equipped with SG radar detect Japanese battleship Kirishima at range of approximately 18,400 yards and commence firing, achieving 9 16-inch hits from 75 rounds fired, representing 12% hit probability at night against maneuvering target, while Japanese lookouts hadn't visually detected Washington, allowing American battleship to achieve complete surprise, November 30 Battle of Tassafaronga saw American cruisers detect Japanese destroyer squadron at range of approximately 23,000 yards, providing extended warning time, though tactical errors in subsequent engagements still resulted in American tactical defeat, demonstrating that radar provided information advantage but couldn't compensate for poor tactical decisions and cumulative results across 7 major naval engagements. October 1942. February 1943 showed American forces progressively improving their exchange ratio from catastrophic losses at Savo Island to approximate parity by campaign's end. Technical advantages that refined procedures provided included developing standard radar contact reporting format where operators transmitted bearing, range, and approximate contact size using consistent terminology that fire control crews understood, eliminating communication ambiguities, creating target tracking procedures where radar operators maintained plots of multiple contacts, allowing fire control to engage targets sequentially, working from highest to lowest priority without losing situational awareness, and establishing radar visual coordination where visual lookouts confirmed radar designations when possible, but where radar maintained targeting authority when visual confirmation wasn't available within reasonable timeframe, allowing engagement at extended ranges despite absence of visual identification. Numbers accumulating across operations showed significant impact on campaign effectiveness. Radar-equipped ships achieved average first-hit ranges of approximately 8,500 yards compared to approximately 4,500 yards for ships relying on visual fire control, representing 89% increase in effective range. American ships equipped with radar suffered approximately 30% lower casualties than non-radar-equipped ships in comparable engagements, suggesting that early target detection and engagement provided survival advantage beyond just offensive effectiveness, and Japanese reinforcement success rate declined from approximately 90% of Tokyo Express runs successfully landing troops in August-September to approximately 40% in November-December as American radar-equipped forces increasingly interdicted Japanese operations. If you're finding this account of how tactical innovation in radar fire control transformed American naval disadvantage into competitive capability during critical Guadalcanal campaign valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to understand how technological adaptation at tactical level overcame enemy training and doctrinal advantages that had dominated early Pacific naval warfare. Coordination improvements included establishing radar picket destroyers positioned approximately 10,000 yards ahead of main formation, providing early warning when Japanese forces approached, allowing cruisers additional time to prepare firing solutions, developing communication protocols where radar-equipped ships shared contact information with non-equipped ships, enabling entire formation to benefit from radar intelligence even when only portion of ships possessed equipment and training. Backup radar operators who could assume control if primary operator became casualty, ensuring that radar capability survived battle damage that might kill or wound individual crew members. Equipment standardization accelerated after Navy Bureau of Ships observed that different radar models created coordination problems. Fleet Directive issued December 1942 specified that all cruisers and battleships would receive SG radar installation priority and that destroyer SG radar installation would follow as equipment became available from manufacturing. Standardization improved maintenance by reducing spare parts requirements and improved operator training by allowing standardized curriculum rather than equipment-specific training for each radar model. Navy institutional response developed as senior commanders recognized innovation's strategic significance. Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral Chester Nimitz visited Guadalcanal December 1942 and observed radar fire control demonstrations, subsequently issued directive that all major surface combatants would receive radar installation and crew training before deployment to combat theaters, and 3rd Fleet established Radar Fire Control School at Pearl Harbor, providing intensive 2-week training for gunnery officers and radar operators, emphasizing integration procedures that Cole and others had developed through combat experience. though formal doctrinal changes wouldn't occur until June 1943. When Bureau of Ordnance published revised fire control manual incorporating radar-directed procedures as primary method with visual spotting as backup, reversing previous doctrine that had considered radar as supplement to visual methods. Quantitative results by campaign's end showed that radar-directed fire control had become decisive factor in American naval success. Approximately 75% of American hits on Japanese ships during night engagements November 1942. February 1943 were achieved using radar-directed fire compared to 25% using visual spotting. Radar-equipped American ships achieved kill ratios averaging 1.2 to 1 against Japanese ships, slight American advantage, compared to 0.3 to 1 for non-radar ships, significant Japanese advantage, demonstrating fourfold effectiveness improvement from radar employment. And post-campaign assessment estimated that radar fire control had reduced American ship losses by approximately 30% compared to projections based on early campaign loss rates, meaning innovation had saved approximately 6 cruisers and 12 destroyers from destruction that would have occurred if visual fire control had remained standard practice. According to USS San Francisco damage reports, radar fire control crisis occurred November 13 when Japanese shells struck San Francisco's superstructure during point-blank engagement with Japanese battleship High, killing 47 crew members including Admiral Callahan, captain, and most bridge crew, and damaging radar antenna, reducing effective range from approximately 15,000 yards to approximately 6,000 yards, and this catastrophic damage threatened to eliminate radar advantage precisely when tactical situation required maximum fire control capability to counter Japanese battleship that outweighed and outgunned San Francisco by factor of approximately 3 to 1. Overwhelming enemy response that created crisis was Japanese commitment of battleship force to Guadalcanal November 12 to 13. Battleships High and Kirishima, accompanied by cruisers and destroyers, were assigned to conduct bombardment of Henderson Field, destroying American aircraft and cratering runways, preventing air operations for several days, allowing Japanese to land major reinforcement convoy under daylight air cover, and American naval forces that intercepted this Japanese force were significantly outmatched, with American cruisers' 8-inch guns unable to penetrate battleship armor at typical engagement ranges, while Japanese 14-inch battleship guns could devastate American cruisers with single salvo, creating tactical situation where American forces required every possible advantage, including radar fire control, to have any chance of preventing Japanese bombardment mission. Critical decision under pressure confronted Cole when radar damage became apparent approximately 20 minutes into engagement. Reduced radar range meant Cole couldn't detect Japanese ships until they closed to approximately 6,000 yards, barely beyond visual detection range, eliminating most of radar's advantage and providing early warning and extended engagement opportunity. And Cole had to choose between continuing radar fire control using degraded equipment that might provide marginal advantage or reverting to visual fire control that crew was less practiced with, but that might prove more reliable given radar's compromised state. And complicating decision was that battle casualties had killed or wounded approximately 60% of fire control crew, requiring Cole to operate with surviving personnel who were partially trained backups rather than primary operators. Close call with specific details illustrated how equipment failure compounded combat crisis. At approximately 0200 hours, Cole's degraded radar detected contact bearing 290 at range of approximately 5,800 yards that radar return suggested was cruiser-sized vessel. Cole designated target for main battery and fire control solution was calculated within 90 seconds. But before San Francisco completed firing sequence, visual lookouts identified target as American destroyer USS Starrett crossing San Francisco's bow at range of approximately 4,200 yards, meaning radar had misidentified contact range by approximately 1,600 yards, 27% error. and had Cole not received visual confirmation, San Francisco would have fired on friendly destroyer, potentially sinking it from point-blank broadside. Immediate aftermath of near-friendly fire incident was Cole ordering temporary halt to radar fire control while damage assessment determined whether radar ranging accuracy could be trusted. And during this assessment period, San Francisco engaged Japanese ships using visual spotting, achieving reduced effectiveness because fire control solutions took approximately 5 minutes to develop compared to 2 minutes using radar, and because visual identifications at night were uncertain, causing gun crews to hesitate before firing, allowing Japanese ships to close range and achieve torpedo launch positions. And this tactical degradation demonstrated how dependent American fire control had become on radar, with reversion to traditional methods producing measurably worse results. Specific circumstances that compounded crisis included that communication circuits between radar station and fire control plot had been severed by battle damage, requiring Cole to physically relocate to radar station and manually relay contact information to fire control using sound-powered phones that were backup system. That fire control computers had lost electrical power, requiring manual calculations using mechanical backup that were slower and less accurate than automated solutions, and that smoke from fires burning throughout ship obscured visual observation, making visual fire control nearly impossible precisely when radar failures forced reliance on visual methods, creating compound failure where neither primary nor backup systems function adequately. Recovery procedure that Cole improvised involved establishing approximate radar calibration by comparing radar ranges to visual ranges for identifiable landmarks, including Savo Island and Cape Esperance, visible on both radar and visually, determining that radar was reading approximately 25% long on range measurements, and instructing fire control to apply correction factor to all radar ranges before calculating firing solutions, though this improvised calibration was approximation rather than precise correction, meaning fire control accuracy remained degraded, but was sufficient for continued operations at reduced effectiveness. Decision by surviving senior officer Commander Herbert Scanland, who assumed command after Admiral and Captain were killed, was to continue engagement despite damaged radar and depleted crew, because breaking off action would allow Japanese battleships to bombard Henderson Field unopposed, and Scanland ordered Cole to continue radar fire control using best judgment about contact identification, accepting risk of friendly fire because allowing Japanese to accomplish bombardment mission would have strategic consequences exceeding risk of tactical fratricidal incident, and this decision reflected recognition that radar fire control, despite damaged state, remained superior to available alternatives. San Francisco's continued combat effectiveness despite severe damage demonstrated both value of radar fire control and vulnerability of depending on single system. Ship remained in action approximately 2 additional hours, achieving several hits on Japanese ships before withdrawing when ammunition ran low. But degraded radar capability meant engagement ranges averaged approximately 5,500 yards compared to approximately 8,500 yards earlier in campaign, representing approximately 35% reduction in effective range that allowed Japanese ships to close to positions where their heavier armament posed greater threat to American ships. And this performance degradation illustrated that while radar provided decisive advantage when functioning, its failure created significant capability reduction that backup systems couldn't fully compensate for. According to South Pacific Force Final Action Report dated March 1943, Guadalcanal Naval Campaign concluded February 1943. After 7 major night surface engagements spanning 5 months, and final outcome regarding radar fire control innovation showed decisive success despite November crisis, American forces had sunk approximately 24 Japanese warships while losing approximately 23 American ships, producing approximate parity in ship losses. But strategic American victory because Japanese failed to prevent American control of Guadalcanal and eventually evacuated remaining Japanese garrison February 1943. Acknowledging campaign defeat, and post-campaign analysis attributed American operational success significantly to radar fire control that had transformed American tactical disadvantage in night combat into approximate competitive equality by campaign's end. Total numbers regarding radar employment and effectiveness quantified innovation's contribution. Radar-equipped American ships participated in approximately 47 night engagements during campaign, achieving average detection range of approximately 12,000 yards compared to approximately 4,000 yards visual detection, giving American forces approximately 8 minutes additional warning time before engagement commenced. Radar-directed fire accounted for approximately 65% of American hits on Japanese ships during night combat, representing approximately 280 confirmed hits from approximately 4,300 rounds fired at radar-designated targets for hit probability of approximately 6.5%. And these results compared favorably to visual fire control that achieved approximately 4.2% hit probability, demonstrating that radar targeting produced approximately 55% accuracy improvement despite engaging at longer ranges where ballistic dispersion typically reduced accuracy. Rounds fired in targets eliminated through radar coordination demonstrated efficiency advantage. American forces expended approximately 32,000 rounds of cruiser-caliber ammunition during campaign night engagements, achieving approximately 800 confirmed hits and destroying or heavily damaging 24 Japanese ships, meaning average of approximately 40 rounds per hit and approximately 1,300 rounds per ship destroyed, and these figures compared favorably to pre-war peacetime gunnery exercises where average rounds per hit exceeded 60 under ideal daylight conditions against non-maneuvering targets, suggesting that radar-directed night combat fire achieved accuracy approaching or exceeding visual daylight fire when radar functioned properly. Targets eliminated included high-value Japanese ships that significantly affected strategic balance. Battleships Hai and Kirishima, both sunk during November engagements, represented approximately 15% of Japanese battleship strength in Pacific theater. Heavy cruiser Kinagasa sunk November 14 and cruisers Furitaka and Keiko sunk earlier in campaign, reduced Japanese cruiser strength by approximately 10%, and destroyer losses totaling 14 ships represented approximately 8% of Japanese destroyer force. And cumulative effect was that Japanese Navy's surface combat capability in South Pacific was reduced by approximately 12% during 5-month campaign, while American losses of approximately 8% were being replaced by new construction at rates that Japanese shipbuilding capacity couldn't match, making exchange ratio strategically favorable to America despite approximate tactical parity. Accuracy metrics demonstrated radar procedures precision advantage. Ships equipped with SG radar and employing integrated fire control achieved first salvo straddle, shells landing short and over target, approximately 40% of time compared to approximately 15% for visual fire control. And time required to achieve effective fire after initial detection averaged approximately 3 minutes for radar-directed fire compared to approximately 7 minutes for visual fire, representing approximately 57% reduction in engagement timeline that translated to 4 additional salvos fired before Japanese ships could close to decisive torpedo range. Comparison to standard visual approach showed quantifiable improvements. Battle of Savo Island August 9, where American forces relied entirely on visual detection, resulted in 4 cruisers sunk within 30 minutes, with American forces achieving minimal hits on attacking Japanese ships. While Battle of Guadalcanal November 12 to 15, where American forces employed radar fire control, resulted in 2 Japanese battleships sunk and 1 cruiser sunk despite Japanese possessing superior force composition, and this outcome reversal demonstrated that radar fire control had overcome Japanese night fighting advantages that had dominated campaign's opening phase. Immediate tactical result was securing American control of waters around Guadalcanal by January 1943. Japanese Tokyo Express runs that had succeeded approximately 90% of time in August-September were succeeding only approximately 30% of time by January as American radar-equipped forces increasingly interdicted Japanese operations. Japanese evacuation of approximately 11,000 troops February 1 to 7 acknowledged that they could no longer sustain garrison facing American naval interdiction and marine ground operations, and American ability to conduct daylight resupply. Operations without Japanese interference confirmed that America had achieved sea control necessary for sustaining operations throughout Solomon Islands. Strategic result of campaign success exceeded immediate tactical gains by establishing foundation for Allied offensive operations up Solomon Islands chain. With Guadalcanal secured as base, American forces launched progressive operations capturing Russell Islands February 1943. New Georgia June-August 1943. And ultimately Bougainville November 1943. Progressively tightening siege around major Japanese base at Rabaul that would be neutralized by early 1944. And this operational momentum was enabled by naval superiority that radar fire control had been instrumental in achieving during critical Guadalcanal campaign where outcome had been uncertain through November 1942. Cole's contribution to final outcome was recognized through posthumous award. He was killed when San Francisco was struck during November 13 engagement of Navy Cross for actions during battle where his radar fire control direction had enabled San Francisco to achieve multiple hits on Japanese battleship despite severe battle damage and command casualties, though citation focused on courage under fire rather than acknowledging broader tactical innovation significance. According to memorandum from Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz dated February 28, 1943. What senior commanders said after Guadalcanal reflected institutional acceptance of radar fire control despite initial resistance. Nimitz wrote that radar-directed fire control had proven decisive factor in achieving American naval success at Guadalcanal and should be adopted as standard doctrine for all surface combatants. That gunnery officers should receive comprehensive radar training before deployment emphasizing integration procedures that combat experience had validated, and that ships without radar should receive installation priority before conducting operations in combat zones, and this endorsement from theater commander represented significant validation of innovation that junior officers like Cole had championed against institutional skepticism. Orders to train others for radar fire control were issued March 15 when Pacific Fleet established Fire Control Radar School at Pearl Harbor, providing intensive 3-week course for gunnery officers, radar operators, and fire control technicians. Curriculum included radar operation and maintenance, target identification and tracking procedures, fire control integration techniques, and tactical employment doctrine including engagement priorities and coordination with visual spotting, and program produced approximately 400 newly trained personnel during March-June 1943. Preparing for Central Pacific offensive operations including Gilbert Islands and Marshall Islands campaigns. How many units adopted radar fire control procedures quantified innovations dissemination, all American battleships and cruisers operating in Pacific Theater by June 1943. Had integrated radar with fire control systems following Guadalcanal example, destroyer radar integration was approximately 60% complete by mid-1943. With remainder receiving equipment as manufacturing capacity allowed, and Atlantic Fleet forces observed Pacific success and began implementing similar procedures, with British Royal Navy also adopting radar fire control after observing American results at Guadalcanal, demonstrating that tactical innovation developed in Pacific had broader application across Allied naval forces. Recognition that Cole and other pioneer radar officers received was mixed. Cole's posthumous Navy Cross acknowledged his courage. but citation didn't mention radar innovation specifically. Several surviving gunnery officers who championed radar integration received commendations for technical proficiency, and institutional recognition came primarily through doctrinal adoption and training program establishment rather than through individual awards reflecting Navy culture that emphasized collective success over individual innovation, though post-war histories would credit Guadalcanal radar pioneers with revolutionizing naval warfare by making electronics central to combat effectiveness. Institutional documentation of procedures occurred June 1943. When Bureau of Ordnance published revised Naval Gunnery Manual incorporating radar-directed fire control as primary method, manual specified standard procedures for radar operation, contact reporting formats, fire control integration, and tactical employment guidelines codifying innovations that Cole and others had developed through combat experience, and manual distributed fleet-wide ensured that all ships would employ consistent procedures facilitating coordination during multi-ship operations. Statistical analysis of radar programs' effectiveness across Pacific Fleet. 1943. 1945. Validated Guadalcanal results. American ships equipped with radar achieved average kill ratios of approximately 2.1 to 1 against Japanese ships in night surface engagements compared to approximate parity during Guadalcanal campaign, demonstrating progressive improvement as equipment reliability increased and crew training improved. American night combat casualties declined approximately 45% comparing 1943 1945. Period 2. 1942. Guadalcanal period. Though multiple factors including improved damage control and better tactical doctrine contributed beyond just radar, and post-war assessment estimated that radar fire control had contributed to sinking approximately 60 Japanese warships during 1943 1945. Period, representing approximately 15% of Japanese Navy's warship losses attributable significantly to American electronic warfare advantages. Successor officers who continued radar innovation included Lieutenant Commander James Stewart, who'd served as Cole's assistant during Guadalcanal and who subsequently commanded destroyer USS Fletcher employing radar fire control during Philippine Sea Campaign. 1944. And Captain Arleigh Burke, who observed Guadalcanal radar employment and subsequently incorporated radar tactics into destroyer squadron doctrine that he employed during Solomon Islands operations. 1943 1944. Achieving exceptional success rates against Japanese naval forces through aggressive radar-directed night attacks. Recovery period after Guadalcanal for radar-equipped ships required approximately 1 month for battle damage repairs and crew reconstitution. San Francisco underwent 4 months repairs at Mare Island Naval Shipyard, including complete replacement of damaged fire control systems and upgraded SG radar installation before returning to combat operations June 1943. And surviving crew members received leave before reassignment, with approximately 40% requesting transfer to newly constructed ships where they'd serve as experienced cadre training new crews in combat-proven radar procedures. Adoption timeline showed rapid expansion during 1943. Guadalcanal campaign end February 1943. Saw approximately 20 American ships equipped with integrated radar fire control by June 1943. Approximately 80 ships had capability by December 1943. Approximately 150 ships were equipped, and by war's end August 1945. Essentially all American major surface combatants possessed radar fire control, representing complete institutional adoption of innovation that had begun as unauthorized modification by junior officers challenging conventional doctrine. Budget allocation for radar production increased dramatically after Guadalcanal success became apparent. Fiscal year 1943. Navy appropriations included approximately $115 million for radar procurement compared to approximately $40 million. Fiscal year 1942. Representing approximately 275% increase, and radar production expanded from approximately 200 units monthly in early 1942 to approximately 1,000 units monthly by end of 1943. As manufacturing capacity increased to meet fleet demand that Guadalcanal experience had demonstrated was operationally critical. According to Naval Historical Center analysis published in American Naval Fighting Ships Series, radar fire control innovation that emerged at Guadalcanal established foundation for modern naval warfare, where electronic sensors and automated fire control systems are primary combat capabilities. Integrated combat systems combining radar detection with computer-calculated firing solutions became standard across all naval powers during Cold War and remain core of contemporary warship design and principle that Cole and others demonstrated that electronic detection and automated targeting could overcome human sensory and cognitive limitations, influenced development of guided missiles, automated close-in weapon systems, and network-centric warfare concepts that characterize 21st-century naval operations. Total lives saved through radar fire control adoption across Pacific War is impossible to calculate precisely. But comparative casualty analysis suggests significant impact. American ship losses during night surface engagements declined approximately 45% comparing pre-Guadalcanal to post-Guadalcanal periods, with radar fire control being a significant factor in improved survivability, and if radar integration prevented approximately 12 American cruiser and destroyer losses during 1943. 1945 period based on statistical comparison with 1942. Loss rates calculation suggests approximately 3,600 American sailors' lives were saved through innovation's fleet-wide adoption, and extending analysis to include improved engagement effectiveness that shortened campaign durations suggests total casualties prevented exceeded 5,000 American military personnel plus uncounted Allied merchant sailors whose ships weren't sunk by Japanese forces that American radar-equipped warships destroyed. Battles where radar fire control was employed as standard practice included every major Pacific naval engagement after Guadalcanal, Battle of Philippine Sea June 1944, where American radar-equipped ships provided early warning of Japanese air attacks, enabling fighter interception that destroyed approximately 350 Japanese aircraft in Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Battle of Leyte Gulf October 1944, where American battleships using radar fire control engaged Japanese forces at Battle of Surigao Strait, achieving decisive victory that effectively eliminated Japanese surface fleet as operational threat, and Okinawa Campaign April-June 1945, where radar-equipped ships provided defense against kamikaze attacks, detecting incoming aircraft at ranges exceeding 40 miles, allowing coordinated defensive measures, though radar couldn't completely prevent kamikaze penetrations, demonstrating both capabilities and limitations of electronic warfare. Modern military applications of radar fire control principles developed at Guadalcanal include United States Navy's Aegis combat system integrating radar detection with computer-controlled weapons, producing automated response to threats that human operators couldn't match in speed or accuracy, and combat information centers aboard modern warships descend directly from radar rooms where Cole and other pioneers integrated electronic sensors with weapon systems, creating paradigm where combat decisions are made based on electronic displays rather than visual observation, and training programs emphasizing electronics and computer operation rather than traditional seamanship reflect transformation that radar fire control initiated during 1942. 1943, when electronics became central to naval combat effectiveness. International naval forces that adopted radar fire control during and after World War II include British Royal Navy, which integrated radar with director systems during 1943. 1944. Employing similar procedures to American forces, Soviet Navy, which captured German and Japanese radar equipment and reverse-engineered American systems obtained through Lend-Lease, developing indigenous fire control radars by late 1940s, and post-war expansion of radar technology to all modern navies made integrated fire control international standard by 1960s, demonstrating that innovation developed during Guadalcanal emergency had worldwide influence on naval architecture and tactical doctrine. Technology evolution from World War II radar to modern systems shows progressive sophistication while maintaining core principles. SG radar provided range and bearing to approximately 15,000 yards with accuracy of approximately 100 yards in 2 degrees, while modern phased array radars detect targets beyond 200 miles with accuracy measured in meters and fractions of degrees. But fundamental concept that Cole employed, using electronic detection to achieve firing solutions before visual identification, remains unchanged, though implementation technology has advanced dramatically, and this continuity demonstrates that tactical innovation's value persisted across technological generations, with basic principle remaining valid even as specific equipment evolved. Cole's fate and posthumous recognition illustrated that tactical innovators often don't survive to see full impact of their contributions. He died November 13, 1942. Aged 32 when Japanese shells struck San Francisco's fire control station, killing him and most of his crew. His widow received his Navy Cross in 1943. Ceremony that acknowledged his courage. But that didn't detail his technical innovations because wartime security prevented public discussion of radar capabilities, and his contribution to naval warfare revolution remained largely unknown outside specialist naval circles until declassification of radar technology after war allowed historians to document how junior officers' initiative had overcome institutional resistance, producing tactical advantage that influenced strategic outcomes. Primary sources documenting Guadalcanal operations and radar innovation include action reports from USS San Francisco, USS Washington, and other engaged vessels held at National Archives containing detailed accounts of radar employment and effectiveness, Bureau of Ships technical reports on SG radar installation and performance held at Naval History and Heritage Command Archives, Pacific Fleet Commander-in-Chief war diaries and message traffic held at National Archives documenting command decisions regarding radar adoption, and oral history interviews with Guadalcanal veterans conducted 1960s to 1980s by Naval Institute containing first-person accounts of radar fire control development, including interviews with officers who'd served with Cole. Strategic significance of Guadalcanal extended beyond tactical innovations to include campaign's impact on Pacific War's trajectory. American success at Guadalcanal marked transition from defensive operations following Pearl Harbor to offensive operations that would progressively drive Japanese forces back toward home islands. Psychological impact of defeating Japanese forces who'd seemed invincible during 1941. 1942. Boosted American morale while shocking Japanese command who'd assumed American resolve would collapse after early defeats, and operational lessons including radar fire control informed subsequent American campaigns, producing progressive improvement in combat effectiveness that Japanese forces couldn't match despite their initial tactical advantages. Lessons from Guadalcanal relevant to modern military operations include recognition that technological innovation often emerges from frontline personnel confronting operational challenges rather than from institutional research and development programs, that institutional resistance to innovation can delay adoption of effective solutions even when combat results demonstrate clear advantages, that junior officers' initiative in developing and implementing unauthorized procedures can produce strategic benefits when senior commanders eventually recognize and adopt innovations, and that integrating new technology with existing systems requires both technical expertise and tactical creativity that formal training programs may not provide. But that combat experience develops through necessity. Comparative analysis of Pacific naval warfare evolution shows that Guadalcanal marked an inflection point where American advantages in industrial production and technological innovation began offsetting Japanese advantages in training and tactical doctrine. Early Pacific battles through mid-1942 demonstrated Japanese superiority in night combat, torpedo warfare, and aggressive tactics that American forces struggled to counter, while later battles from late 1942 onward showed progressive American improvement through radar fire control, improved damage control, better tactical coordination, and overwhelming material superiority that Japanese forces couldn't overcome regardless of tactical skill, and this transition was enabled significantly by radar innovation that Cole and others developed during Guadalcanal's desperate fighting. The final assessment decades after Guadalcanal emphasizes that radar fire control represented fundamental transformation in naval warfare where combat effectiveness became dependent on electronic systems and automated processes rather than human senses and manual procedures. That innovation emerged from tactical necessity during campaign where American forces faced technically superior enemy and required every possible advantage to achieve competitive capability, that junior officers' willingness to challenge conventional doctrine and senior commanders' eventual acceptance of unauthorized innovations produced tactical revolution that influenced remainder of Pacific War and established foundations for modern naval warfare. And that human cost of learning curve during Guadalcanal, approximately 5,000 American naval casualties including Cole and thousands of others killed or wounded during campaign, demonstrated that operational innovation often requires sacrifice by pioneers who develop procedures through combat experience that subsequent forces benefit from, and these lessons about relationship between technological innovation, institutional adaptation, and combat effectiveness remain relevant for understanding how military organizations develop new capabilities under pressure of wartime necessity.